Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Power podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life. It's the final part of our series on change, how to change, and tonight we're going to really look at how to make change stick. So let me ask you a question. How do we feel when we set a goal? And we're talking specifically here. We could talk about any, but let's try and focus on spiritual goals. And by a spiritual goal, I mean any goal that is between us and God, between us and other people, between us and ourselves, right? Any goal that is about us bettering ourselves. How do we feel when we set a goal and we fail to achieve it?
Like a failure. Like when you don't hit the goal, you feel like you failed it somehow.
You just say forget it.
Can I push back on that a little bit? Because where does that come from, that like forget it thing? Is it because I think forget it is a different way of saying I feel like a failure? Because when you set a goal, we set a goal because it's important to us. And when we say forget it, what are we really saying?
I can't do it. I'm not up to the task.
So I want to start by sharing with you a letter that Rav Hutner was a rabbi that lived in the last century in Baltimore. And once one of his students wrote him a letter, and he said to him in his letter, he's like, I keep trying and I keep failing. Like, I must be a terrible person, or a letter to that effect. And Rav Hutner wrote a response before I share it with you. What do you think he wrote to him? Yes, Marla, what do you think he wrote to him?
He wrote, but some people say, don't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So you have to do something different. If you keep trying, are you trying the same thing?
Okay, that's a great answer. Try something different.
It's a good thing, and trying is half the battle.
Okay, trying is half the battle, and at least you're trying. Anything else? Yes, Cheryl.
And it's all part of the journey, and you're gonna have ups and downs, but remember that you're on the journey.
Beautiful. So what did Rav Hutner say to him? And I loved all the answers that you gave. They were all so great. Rav Hutner wrote back to him and he says, your letter made me happy. Why? Because the fact that you're failing shows me that you're trying something important. He says, we don't see it enough today. You pick up a book off the shelf, and let's say you go into the bookstore, the Jewish Experience bookstore, and you pick up a biography off the shelf. And he said, actually, I don't know if it was Rav Hutner or someone else who said that there's a big problem with a lot of biographies that are written about rabbis nowadays. Why? What happens is you open up the book about the rabbi, and it'll tell you all the wonderful things that the rabbi did. But you know what's missing? The failures, the struggles. And in fact, by the way, there's a book out there called Holy Woman from Sari Yocheved Rigler, who talks about the struggles, right? And Chicken Soup with Love and Emunah, she does the same things. Sari Yocheved Rigler is an incredible author, and she talks about the struggles that these women had to become who they had to become. Holy Woman is a woman who went through incredible challenges in life and really shone through them. Chicken Soup with Emunah and Love is a book about Rebbetzin Henny Machlis, who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, moved to Israel. She was the mother of 13 children. They had 200 guests for every meal on Shabbat. And one of the things that I loved about that book is it talks about her serenity that she achieved, that she was able to just accept, like, because they did not work for an organization, and when they had 200 guests for Shabbat, for Friday night Shabbat lunch, they were funding it themselves, and they were not a wealthy people. And every week it would be like, do we have enough money to buy the chickens? And she would be like completely serene. And it talks about her struggles as well, because you don't go from where we are to there, and we all have struggles in life, and through overcoming those struggles is how we become who we have to become, right? There's a phrase in the Talmud that talks about Sheva Yipol Sadik Bekom. 7 times. What's the difference? Before I translate it, what's the difference between a righteous person and a not righteous person? What do you think is the difference between a righteous person and someone who's not righteous? The righteous
Oh,
person
yeah.
tries and fails. The non-righteous person tries and fails. The difference is the righteous person falls 7 times and he gets up the 8th time. The person who's not righteous falls 7 times and doesn't get up. And this is what Rav Hutner said, is that you're failed, great. That shows you're trying, that shows you're alive, that shows you're in the battle. Now get up and try again. And it's incredible. It's an incredible mind switch. If we can switch our mind and we can kind of like, yeah, I failed. You know what? I did 2 things and I failed with 3 things. Great. That means tomorrow I get up and I have those 3 things to work on. It's interesting what you said about a righteous person not having a Yetzer Hara. So we actually told something. The Talmud tells us a fascinating story, and it's on topic for this. I'll share it with you as well, because at the end of time, what's going to happen is God, once Mashiach comes and the world to come is ushered in, we're going to have a very limited sense of free will. And so the Talmud talks about this time, and it says that what God is going to do is he's going to take the Yetzer Hara and he's going to slaughter it. And what's going to happen is the righteous people will watch God slaughtering it, and the evil people will watch God slaughtering it, and they will both have a reaction to it. They will the righteous person will look at it and cry and say, "How did I overcome such a mountain?" And the evil person will look at it and say, "How was I not able to withstand a hair?" When you tear a hair off, right? Like it's as strong as a strand of hair, right? You break it off like that. Right now, because this is a wig, it's expensive. So don't ever don't try this at home, right? It doesn't grow back. Right, 2. See how much I love you, ladies? Now, you saw how easy it was to break that? And the evil person will look at it at the Yetzer Hara and say the Yetzer Hara was like a hair strand, right? So thin, so weak. How was I not able to overcome it? Now, which one is it? Is it the hair strand, the strand of hair? Or is it this giant mountain that the righteous person will overcome and say, oh my goodness, how did I overcome this giant mountain? Sometimes when we're gripped with temptation, it feels so strong. And yet, if we're able to procrastinate a little bit, the temptation passes. And that's what we'll look at the Yetzer Hara and say, wow, had I just waited a bit, the temptation would have passed. The righteous person is going to look at this Yetzer Hara and say, wow, I overcame it and I overcame it. And if you think about it, like each overcoming is a pebble. You put those pebbles on top of each other, it builds a giant mountain. And I think perhaps the message to us is that there's 2 ways this can go. It's sometimes we look at what we've done and we're like, what did I do? And or we forget the progress that we've made. Or sometimes we look at what we have to do and we're like, how on earth can I climb this giant mountain? Like, it's coming up to Yom Kippur and I told God that I want to be more patient this year, or I told God that I want to do something special for Shabbat. And you know what? I'm standing here before Yom Kippur, and I'm saying the same thing that I said last year and the year before that and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And seriously, am I actually going to be able to do it? And what we can kind of think of doing is if we can do 1%, right? So make Shabbat 1% more special. Don't worry about taking on the whole of Shabbat this year. Do it 1% special. Every Shabbat, make 1% special. Imagine if you made every single Shabbat 1% more special this year. Imagine next year what you'll be standing in front of Yom Kippur, a totally different Shabbat. The book Atomic Habits talks about this idea that the difference between he highlights it with different like sports teams that went from failing to actually winning. And how did they do that? By focusing on becoming 1% better. You want to become more patient? Just do 1% more better, right? And that's kind of what the hair strand is. 1%, it's small, it's nothing. And yet over time, it builds up and it builds up and it becomes this giant mountain that you'll look at the end of the year and you'll be like, wow, I did that. That's incredible. We've kind of spoken about the general philosophy of how we reacted to failure. Let's talk about some practical ideas of how we can actually deal with failure in the moment, right? When we're in the moment, you've made your New Year's resolution, you know what you want to do, you've started to make the changes, and now you're hitting a failure. What can we do? Any ideas, any thoughts on that? Try and learn from what you've beautiful. There's an idea that I like to quote a lot, which is we take failure off the table. Like, imagine what life would look like if failure was not on the table. Okay, so what if failure is not on the table? Now you have two choices. It's either you win or you learn.
Yeah.
Right? So either, my goal is, let's say, for example, to light Shabbat candles. Week number 1, I light the Shabbat candles. Week number 2, candle lighting comes and goes, and I don't light Shabbat candles. Is that a failure? It's a learning opportunity, right? How do we learn from it? Before we even go into that, I would say, look at, why didn't I light Shabbat candles? Is it because I forgot to check the time? Is it because I didn't have candles in the house? Is it because I forgot that was important to me? Because all those different reasons could be different reasons. If it's because, suddenly 9 o'clock at night, you remember and you look at the calendar and it's like, oops, candle lighting was 6 o'clock. Then Friday morning or Thursday evening, I have to check the calendar. I have to get a magnet, put it on my fridge, so I'll know. Is it because you knew it was 6 o'clock and you came 6 o'clock and suddenly you realize, oh, I don't have any candles in the house. In which case, on Thursday or Saturday night, buy some candles, right? You look at it as, okay, why didn't I do what I wanted to do? And how do I learn? And it's such an incredible way of living life, right? And it's a very Jewish concept, this idea that we only look back to learn. We look back. The real greatness comes from when we're able to look at the things that we failed and say, what happened that I was able to do it? And the reason why we do that is to learn what we have to do going forward. That same idea of we kind of look at it with an eye to what caused me to do or not do that thing. Now I know what I have to do differently. Is it because I completely forgot that I want to light Shabbat candles until Saturday morning? In which case, put it on my calendar. So I have a reminder 12 o'clock on Friday to remind me to light Shabbat candles. It's all about looking back to learn what I can do different in the future. I want to say something. We look at these things, they're not actually failures. What they are steps to actualizing what it is that we want to accomplish, right? Because it's very nice to have this idea of how to, I'm going to separate milk and meat, but that's just an idea. In order to make it into that potential idea into reality, we have to bring it into our life. And every time we make a mistake and we go through that process of realizing, I made a mistake. What caused that mistake? It's how we build that pathway of actualizing it and making it a reality for our lives. I want to share some other ideas. When we're looking back at what we did, let me ask you this question. I'm here where I am in my life, right? And you can take a moment and think about something that where you are in your life, and maybe you're not so thrilled about where you are, right? How much are we to blame for where we are, for where we find ourselves in our lives today? Okay.
I disagree.
Okay. This is where it gets exciting. Okay, you would say fully responsible. Valerie would say not. You disagree?
Because if people do things to me that I have no control of, I can't control them.
Yeah.
Huh?
You control your reaction.
I get an example of my daughter went through something very difficult this week and could have had two very, very different reactions. One of the reactions could have ended her up in a very bad place. And the reaction that she deferred to was, okay, this happened and I'm going to move forward in this way. They're two very different reactions.
And that was solely in her control?
Well, I mean, yes, because she did the work. Like, I think.
Okay, so can I use, and not knowing your daughter and not knowing the situation, but can I use this as a case study? Let's say there's her and there's her friend, and the situation happens to both of them, and your daughter has that reaction, and her friend has a very different reaction. Is it solely because of what they chose?
Because of what?
What they chose?
Their reaction, you mean their response?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it has to do with who their parents are, who their teachers are.
My point. That's what I'm going for. What about if friends, let's call her Jane, right? has parents who don't care about her.
Jane's going to have a much different reaction than Amuna, and Amuna's had the bad reactions and then learned from them, and this time chose different, where Jane hopefully will get the same type of help, and next time, God forbid, next time could choose different.
What type of help are we talking about? We're talking about therapeutic
Yeah.
help. What if Jane doesn't have medical insurance and does not have the funds to go for therapeutic help? I want to point out something, and I'm going somewhere with this. You'll follow along, hopefully, right? And if not, you'll ask me questions. You pinpointed complexities because you pinpointed choices that she's made, and you also pinpointed things that are so out of her control, right? She is lucky and privileged to have parents who care about her. She's lucky and privileged to live in a country where therapy is an option. She's lucky and privileged that she has access to that. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that both are true, right? There are things that happen to us that are completely out of control, and there are things that we have control over. And there's a third and here. Sometimes we don't know the answer. I'm standing here today and I have a horrible tendency to lie, for example. This is not true. Well, now you have no clue, because if I have a horrible tendency to lie and it's true, I would
Then
also
you're
say it's not
lying.
true, right? So you have no clue whether it is or isn't, right? It could be because I grew up in a family where there was no value put on honesty, and that's how I grew up, and that's why I'm predisposed. And I went to a school where I was never taught about honesty, and that's why I did it. And it could be I grew up in a family where honesty was emphasized, but for whatever reason I had a genetic disposition to do it. And it could be that I grew up in a family in where it was honesty was emphasized, and I made wrong decisions, and I told one lie, and then it became easier to tell another lie, and then I fell into it, right? And those different aspects could be true. It could be that it's my fault, and it could be it's not my fault. And oftentimes there's an interplay. Some of it's my fault, some of it's not my fault. So it's often, and even with ourselves, definitely with other people, we don't know. We don't know what's in their control and what's outside of their control. Even when it comes to our kids, we don't know. We don't know whether, they're making a right choice. They're trying so hard. They're not trying so hard. There's so many aspects that can be at play here. But with ourselves, we're looking back at things to learn from them. It's important to understand that it's not always helpful to kind of point the finger and say, why am I here? I'm here because I made terrible decisions. If you know you made a bad decision and you can learn from it, great. More important is to ask the question of, what do I need to do now? Right? I am where I am. I'm sitting here today and I've got this horrible tendency to lie. What do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? Is tell the truth. Every time, as much as I can, right? So that's the better question to kind of ask, instead of asking ourselves, how did I end up here? And how could I feel so badly? But what is the next step that I need to do? And how do I move on from here? Any questions, any thoughts, any comments on that?
I can't, the hardest thing I've been trying to do mainly is change my family.
Can I tell you a
Yeah,
story
my
about
God.
that? I don't remember who it's attributed. There's a story told that a rabbi who said, when I was young, I wanted to change the world. Then I got a bit older and I realized that's hard. So I wanted to change my country. Then I got a little bit older and I realized that's impossible. So I wanted to change my city. And then I got a little bit older than that and I realized that never going to happen. So at least I wanted to change my community. And then I got a little bit older than that and I was like, never going to happen. At least I'll change my family. And then I got a little bit older and I thought to myself, if only I would have spent all those years changing myself, then I would have changed my family. Then I would have changed the city, right? So that is, it's, and the hardest thing I think is changing ourselves, right? And the most effective way of changing the world around us. And both things are true, right? It could be that things that happen are out of your control and where you are, and you still have the choice of how you're going to react in the future. Now, when we're talking about change, there's an important thing to the Talmud talks about. Everything is in the hand of heaven except the fear of heaven. What does it mean? What does that mean to you when you hear that? Everything is in the hand of heaven except the fear of heaven. A lot of times, things like our health, our wealth, our family, our social status in the community, a lot of times, sometimes it's because of us, right? Someone who smokes, nonstop and has a lung problem, maybe they have something to do with that, right? But a lot of times it's not in our control. We live a healthy life and we don't know what our health is going to be, right? That comes from Hashem. How we react to it, right? What is our reaction? How am I going to deal with the family and friends that are in my life? How am I going to deal with the money I do or don't have? How am I going to deal with the character traits that I give me? That is totally, totally within our control. And what's important to know is that there's a big difference between physical success and spiritual success. What's the difference? In physical success, you can put all the effort in and you can still fail, right? Let's just say, for example, you have a job interview and you prepare and you do your research and you practice, and you could still drive to the thing and get stuck in traffic and miss your interview. Completely out of your control. Right, you left in time. There was a crazy accident on the way, which you never could have foreseen, and you get there late. Or someone crashed into you. Yeah. Or you get to the interview and you just don't hit it off with the guy. Right, you forget everything that you had to say. Right, these things happen. In spiritual, the success is in our hands. Let me throw it out to you. How do you measure spiritual success? Because effort in spirituality is success. We're told, the Talmud tells us that God doesn't count pages, God counts hours. What does it mean? It means when someone sits down and studies, God doesn't count how many pages you go through. He counts how many hours you do, because he doesn't count the results, the things. He counts how much effort you put in. Generally, when we talk about mitzvah, there's two kind of things that come out of a mitzvah. There's what we call a benefit, and then there's also a reward. What do I mean for it? Let's just take the mitzvah of kosher, right? Now, there's a benefit that comes from eating kosher, which is it's a diet for our soul, right? And it keeps our soul pure and well-fed and well-nourished. There's another benefit of it gives us self-control. When you decide, I'm going to eat this because it's kosher, or I'm not going to eat this because it's not kosher, that's a measure of self-control. There's also a reward that a person gets. Now, the benefit is the same regardless of how hard it is for you to keep kosher. You get those benefits. You get the benefit of self-control. You get the benefit of nourishing your soul, and whatever other benefits come from the mitzvah. The reward is dependent. If it's easy for you to keep kosher, let's say you were born into a family that kept kosher, you live in New York City where there's a plethora, right? How hard is it to keep kosher in New York City when you've grown up keeping kosher your whole life? Not hard at all.
Israel. Plenty of money.
And you have plenty of money, right? Or Israel. We spent the summer, we spent a week and a half in the summer in New York, and I went to visit my son who was in the mountains. And the mountains, right, which is the summertime retreat place for the summertime community, has more kosher options than Denver, right? Like, it blew my mind away, right? Like, it's incredible. They have this incredibly large supermarket with everything in it, including a pizza place, including a deli, including a coffee shop. And there's another one the same around the corner. It's absolutely incredible. Sushi, whatever you want. Someone like that who's keeping kosher, is it hard for them? Let's say it's not. So the reward that they get is minimal. They're going to get the benefits, all the benefits, but the reward is minimal. Someone else who's never heard about kosher, learns about kosher for however it is, and chooses to buy a kosher product, and it's hard for them. The reward that they're going to get is massive, right? Because the benefit is the same of the mitzvah, but the reward is dependent upon the effort that we put in. And it's very, very important to remember our effort is what counts, right? I tried, that is success. And I want to share one final thought before we kind of wrap this up. And that is, what's the problem with procrastinating? Sometimes when we think, I'll try, I didn't manage to light Shabbat candles this week, I'll try next week. Or it comes to Thursday and you're like, I should go out to the store and buy candles. You're like, I'm tired, I'll do it next week. What's the problem with procrastination? It gets harder and
It becomes a habit.
becomes a habit. And I think you said something. You might never do it. In fact, the Procrastination, it's in my book as well. It says, don't say when I have time, I'll study, because maybe you'll never have time, right? There's a few problems with procrastination. One is that sometimes we procrastinate and we never get around to it. Right? Yeah, I'll do it when I have time. I'll do it when it feels right, or I'll do it when things are easier. And sometimes we don't have time, and sometimes things don't get easier. And the other problem with procrastination is that even if we do it, even if the next Shabbat I do something candles, I've lost that Shabbat forever, the first Shabbat forever. And in fact, if you think about it, what's worse in Jewish thought, to do something wrong, to do an avera, to do a sin, or to fail to do a mitzvah? What's wrong? To eat something that you're not allowed to eat, or to fail to eat a matzah on Pesach?
I would say the second one.
Okay, I would say that too.
Yeah, me too.
And the answer is the opposite. Why? Because in Jewish law, we have something called teshuvah, which is a repair process, right? You do an avera, you do something wrong, you mess up. There's a process of how we repair it. There's 4 steps. You have to stop doing it. You have to feel bad about it. You have to make a commitment for the future, etc., etc. This is what Yom Kippur is all about, right? We're going to come up to this Yom Kippur, and it's the opportunity to fix all our averas, all our sins that we've done this past year or up to now. What's the repair process for a mitzvah that we fail to do? How do we fix that? You can't get back a lost opportunity. So when we're kind of looking at how do we fail, how do we make changes stick? I think it's important to remember a few things. It's important to remember that we have to grab the opportunities, because even if we mess up, there's a repair process. But if we fail to try, then we can never get that opportunity to try again. And if we do try and we fail, remember that what Rav Hutner said. Rav Hutner said that the fact that you're failing shows that you're doing well, right? Because that is what a righteous person is. A righteous person, they're not righteous because they never failed. They're not righteous because they keep trying. They're righteous because they keep trying, because they keep failing and they get up. Right? And when we're looking at things, we want to try and take failure off the table. We want to focus on either I win or I learn from this. And when we're learning on it, do it in a compassionate way, kind of look at it and say, okay, what did I do wrong? And I'm only looking at that in order to know what I can do differently in the future so I can have different results. Any thoughts, any questions, anything that resonated with you that you'd like to share with the rest of the group?
Okay, if this is what you want me to do, or this is what is supposed to happen, it helps you to move forward, to maybe do something else. It's like, okay, maybe. So the question is, sometimes you're trying to do something over and over, or you're trying for a certain goal, but maybe if you're not succeeding at some point, how do you realize maybe Hashem doesn't want you to pursue that goal? Maybe you need to be looking at something else, like a different direction than what you were trying.
Wow.
That's a great question. And I would say that's probably something that's worthwhile discussing with a mentor, because sometimes we can get tricked into not realizing our progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can fail to see the good in the things that we're doing. So I would imagine that that's something best to discuss with a mentor that knows you well, or even a friend. It's a good question. Anyone else wants to share anything?
Do the rest of this next week?
Okay, so next week is a Chag, and we actually have a Sukkot dinner here.
I signed up already.
Yay,
Well, I didn't
fantastic.
see an email about
I think it was
Okay.
on Facebook.
It was on Facebook. I will send out an email.
So when
to them
sundown
tomorrow.
to Thursday night, sundown is a no drive day.
Wednesday night, Thursday night, Wednesday night till Saturday night. It's a 3-day Chag again.
3 days of no driving?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And it's gonna be like that for kids. So
Yeah.
this is always a 3-day class.
I don't know, I haven't seen
Yeah.
that.
Thursday,
I will
Friday,
send it. I will put it on the group. Okay, I'm gonna. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.